Let me set the context for the conversation that we intend to have. We've seen a steady growth rate of about 7% for the last decade. We've seen a slowdown, which is now starting to see signs of revival, but just how quickly we are actually going to see a pickup in capex, a pickup in investment, is a question mark. The economy is expected to grow at about 7.3% for this year and 7.5% for the next year. This is the latest reading of the World Bank. And in order for India to become a middle-income economy, we will need to touch a growth rate of 8% for the next 30 years. That is a tall ask, and a lot more needs to be done on the structural reform front to get going. Also, what is important is that if India truly wants to share center stage on the global map, it needs to become much more relevant when it comes to global trade. Our share of global trade today is under 2%, and while that has protected us through global downturns, if we aspire to really edge higher, it is going to be imperative for us to rev up our export engine. So let me start by asking you, Mr. Kant, because this is a theme that you're a big believer in. You believe that India needs to do much more to take a share of global trade. At under 2%, it is disappointing that we haven't done better. On the export front, sir, if I were to look at the data, FY15 down 1.3% to 310 billion. FY16 down 15.5% to 262 billion. FY17, we've started to see an uptick up by about 5%, and we're expecting an uptick of about 10% for this particular year. What can we do to really get the export engine firing?
Sharing a couple of things. One is that we are growing at about 7.3%. We need to accelerate it even further. But on the export side, we need to get the size and scale of manufacturing right. You know, we're still producing too small. We are not penetrating global markets. It's very important that we do it to large scale and size, number one. Number two, we still have very antiquated labor and land laws. We need to get it right. You need a lot of institutional restructuring. Number three, India is still, we've jumped up 42 positions in the ease of doing business. This government is focused on making India easy and simple, but we must, in the next 2 years, we need to crack it in the top 50 position. That's important. Fourth, logistics is critical. The turnaround time in Indian ports is still it takes too much time. I think the big ticket thing will be when the dedicated freight corridor comes in, goods produced in the northern part of India will reach ports in 14 hours. So we need to get the infrastructure right so as to enable the cost of logistics to fall very radically. And I think these four things, to my mind, are critical to enable India to penetrate global markets.
Mr. Prabhu, if I could pick up on the point that Mr. Kant made, that for India to truly occupy center stage on the global map, we need to do much better on the export front. Two specific questions now. On manufacturing, our aspiration has been to take the share of manufacturing to GDP to 25%. Look at the data, sir. Manufacturing for FY15, 16.3%. Manufacturing for FY18, 16.3%. There's been absolutely no change, and we keep talking about make in India, export from India, and so on and so forth. What seems to be holding us back?
There's a huge servicification of manufacturing. The services are now embedded into manufacturing. So when you see a growth into manufacturing, the services grow. For example, Mr. Anil Agarwal will tell you, he operates at a global level, that when his output increases, does not necessarily the output that increases in the same proportion at his total revenue might increase, because he may be having an activity. Depends upon service, so activity to activity. So this is one part. Secondly, that's why to address the issue, we are coming with a new industrial policy. The idea is that to make a new industrial policy is to exactly address the issue of increasing the GDP of manufacturing into the share of manufacturing into GDP. That is exactly to address the issue. So what you are saying is a diagnosis of a problem. What I am telling you is a solution of a problem. So you have done a good job as a doctor. It is my job now to prescribe a medicine and actually ensure the care.
Okay, so I've done my bit as a doctor. It's your job now to prescribe the medication. I would like you to also now prescribe the medication of how you hope to address the challenge that the US has thrown up. President Trump is now talking tariff. The US has decided to move the WTO, the dispute settlement consultation process, against India. They're virtually calling out India's entire trade policy. How prepared are we? We should have some sort of a verdict from the WTO in the next 6 months, depending on how this progresses. But are we going to have to review our export schemes, and what is that going to mean?
You know, you mean the exports or the overall manufacturing?
Yeah. I mean, they've virtually taken everything to the WTO, from SEZs to EOUs to STPI. Every policy of the government of India has now been challenged by the United States at the WTO.
WTO was created much before a government was formed. And we are bound by the WTO rules and regulations. India is a country which follows all international norms, international regulations. We follow them not by letter, by spirit. WTO has a rule that if you exceed your GDP, per capita GDP, for 3 years in a row, about $1,000, then you lose the right of giving subsidies for exports. This happened in year 2016-17. WTO gave us a notice that your GDP for 3 consecutive years has exceeded. So this is something which has happened because of thanks to increase in GDP that you are asking. But increase the GDP led to this issue.
It's a good problem to have.
And when this rule was made, way back in 2011, I have been since then consistently, even as late as now, I raised this issue with the WTO, that when this rule was made, those countries were already about $1,000. They were given 8 years to adjust to the new regime. Whereas when we exceed in 2017, we should also be subjected to the same regulation. We should also get 8 years. There is an ambiguity about it. So we have been raising this issue and we have been consistently raising. So one part is that we will follow the international obligation fully, but obligation also should be such which takes into consideration the reality of the situation. So if you have given it to somebody else, you must also give it to India.
Fair point. That is the point.
There are some countries, I don't want to name them because they are good friends, have exceeded this threshold limit of $1,000 per capita, and they have not been subjected to any regulation. So it should not single out India alone because we are largely growing. We have all the kinds of entrepreneurs in India, and we have such a great anchors in India. We should not be only subjected to discrimination only because of that.
Let me go across to the SBI chief, Mr. Rajneesh Kumar. And sir, let me ask you now, for India to be able to grow at the kind of growth rates that we hope to, which is 8% plus, what is the need of the hour in terms of being able to reimagine public sector banking? Is privatization the answer? Is consolidation the answer? Is more regulatory power to the Reserve Bank over public sector banks the answer? Should we look at ownership and control differently when it comes to public sector banks? What is the answer to your mind, sir?
Too many questions in one question. So my views on privatization versus public, they are very well known by now. My view is that ownership should not matter. Public sector, there are ample examples of very good companies, excellent companies. Private sector, again, very good examples, excellent companies and very bad companies. So there is no uniform prescription that if you are in private sector, then you are good.
Let me ask you, Mr. Agarwal, as I pointed out at the start, you continue to be very bullish on India, even though you've seen a fair amount of setbacks in India. In fact, just today, mining in the state of Goa has been halted on account of a Supreme Court order. What makes you continue to be confident about investing in India, and what do you believe is the need of the hour for us to be able to propel ourselves to an 8% plus kind of growth rate over the next few years?
No, I'm always going to be bullish on India. 20% population of the world live here, the largest democracy of the India. 1%, 80% of the population has voted. Where else you can find something like this? I have 3 or 4 things just for the audience also to think. What we are talking is business. We are talking business and how business being conducted in the world. Business in the democratic country, in a socialist country, the government controls the business. In democratic country, the public control the business. If the bank, if you see the example of L&T, if you see the example of ITC, if you take the example of SDFC,
Yeah.
These are the institution is well regarded in the world. Why can't we have at least 50 companies in the government sector, which is phenomenal? This is a game changer.
Yeah.
Whether it's a ONGC, whether it's a sale, anything. Let the public, why to privatize and given these company to the individual like me? There are the position where these company can be handed over to the public. These are the large public shareholder.
Yeah.
Let them decide the board. Let them decide the CEO. If CEO does not perform, he will come down. If you see the world pattern is, if you see the amount of CEO in the world are Indian. The most of the tech company, most of the manufacturing company is run by the Indians.
So you're saying
why can't the Indian company be run by the CEOs? Why we look at the India's individual business people? Business people are there to take the risk, entrepreneurship. But rest of the business cannot be handled by the government. So 30% of the shareholding government can keep. This is one of the idea. And 70% can be handed over to the public and let them decide. So that was, and your question about the mining, I always said, above the ground, you can have cloth, above the ground, you can have a 2 square meal. But if you want to eradicate poverty, and if you want to create job, you have to go below the ground. Mother Earth is saying that I have oil, I have a gas, I have a gold, I have a copper. The largest employer is the below the ground. And it is the high time where we should look at and see why we should create job outside India. Millions of jobs being created outside India and the goods being imported here. Why can't we produce our own goods here? So this is one of the things. It is very unfortunate when the place like Goa, 75 years mining being happening. Similar situation what happened in Brazil in Rio.
But Mr. Agarwal, is it not also an opportunity for corporate India to hold a mirror up to itself? After all, the Supreme Court is saying that, look, you are not complying with what needs to be done from an environment point of view. If businesses need to be sustainable, they need to think about intergenerational equity. They need to think about intergenerational sustainability as well.
There is no question. We are in a democratic country. We have to follow the highest standard. We have to set the goal for ourselves. There is no question of flouting the environmental rule. The way we can handle, nobody can handle. But something which has not broken, why to fix it? Something which is not broken, 300,000 people are unemployed. So
the court has a different view on that. You're saying if it's not broken, why fix it? The court has a different view on that. But let me go across to Sanjay. And Sanjay Nair, since we're talking about the need for structural reforms, I'm just taking a look at the investment rate. FY15 investment rate of a little over 30%. FY16 28.5%. FY17 28.5%. FY18 28.5%. There is an issue on the investment rate front. There's also an issue on the savings rate front, which I know is something that bothers you, Sanjay, specifically. Where do we go from here if we really want to aspire to be this middle-income economy over the next few years?
I think it's a good question. I think, I share the bullishness of everybody on the right-hand side. I think now is the time when we really have to attack head-on some basic structural issues. I think Mr. Kant mentioned land and labor reforms, but just look at it very simply, okay? Investments today are being driven only by the government, not the private sector. Savings today, government is a dissaver and private savings are reducing. And the only thing going for us today is consumption. No economy can be built only on consumption, and that too, cyclical consumption and fleeting consumption driven either by a stimulus, which we have to do, or just driven by the demographic. You have to increase supply side. So I think the social contract with the private sector is very different. I think it's the right contract to have, but the private sector has to get used to this new contract, and they're still not there. There's legacy debt, which you have, which is obviously, spoiling the party. So I think, Shireen, there are going to be no simple answers. You have to address the issues that face us. It's productivity, it's the administrative reforms, it's land and labor. And Mr. Khan said it, I wouldn't have said it, but, it's not easy to do it. And then you've got, certain things that are dragging us down, which is a massive black hole in the banks. So it's impossible to get savings rates up in this country if you've got a big dissaver, which by definition we will be because we have to look after a lot more people. and the private sector is not there anywhere. So what do we end up doing? We end up welcoming foreign capital. Temporary foreign capital has been coming for years. We've opened up the equity and the debt markets very easily, and that's been good. It's helped our deficit. Hasn't really created real assets. So then you come in with private equity, people that we represent, kind of companies that Deep has made. But ultimately, you can't build an economy on foreign savings. You have to build on local savings. So that's why I'm very passionate about this topic, even if it means that we're doing ourselves a disservice. The country will have to figure out ways of increasing its local savings. And that only happens ultimately when the real markets get connected to capital markets, inflation expectations come down, and people begin to save and invest, not just consume. So look, I'm not an economist, but I think if anybody can do it, this government has got the best governance model. They are on the job, high degree of conviction. They know what they're talking about. Somewhere we got to get these 4-5 structural things going. If we don't do it now, it's just going to get late and late.
If we don't do it now, it's going to be too late. Deep Kalra, I want to come to you now with the startup story. I'm just taking a look at, again, data. The US $76.4 billion of investment-backed deals by venture capital. China, $65 billion. I mean, India, where it's very, very different, the Indian startup ecosystem. I had Vijay Shekhar Sharma on my show a few days ago, and he said that there is no level playing field for Indian companies, that we're giving too much to companies that are based in China, companies that are based in the US, etc. We're not helping the domestic entrepreneur. Deep, A, do you agree? And B, what's the remedy?
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been saying that for a long time. I know Amitabh is not happy when I say that, but I'll tell you why. I think we have a unique opportunity with the new age economy, digital, new age, moving across to AI, machine learning, data science. And the unique opportunity is it'll be very hard for people to disagree, including Professor Krugman, who walked in, that Indians are among the smartest people in the world. I think among the smartest people is fair to say. The CEO of Google today, the CEO of Microsoft today, and the CEOs, just like Anil said, of many, many companies overseas, leading the companies globally are Indians. So there's no dearth of brain power. And actually, that's all we need to win in this game. However, we've rarely come up with products and not services. I'll come to the service sector where we did a great job, and I'll also tell you why. But in products, we've rarely come up with products that are made in India, which we all want to do, but can take on the world. And today with technology and the fourth revolution, there is no reason we can't do it today. So I think
what do you want, Deep? What is it that you want from Mr. Prabhu and Mr. Kant?
I want a lot, but I'll start by saying, so IT and ITES, we all know, became jewels in the Indian crown, and we created great companies like Infosys and TCS and Wipro and many others. We did do something for them. The same crop of people. We have Raman Roy sitting right here. We created, I think 10A, 10B really helped them. And I'm not speaking, for Make My Trip personally. I'm really speaking for the industry. I think we should pull the thread out 10 years, 5 years to 10 years, and we should see what do we want. Do we want Indian companies which can reply to Prime Minister's call for when will we get a Google or a GE out of India? I think we have a great opportunity today. We have the know-how, we have the people, we have a very fertile ground. We have 400 million people, Indians connected today. So we are no longer any different from Silicon Valley, US or China. We have a lot of people. Of course, our consumption power is lower. There's no question, but it's still very large. We have out of these, I think, 200 million people who can afford to buy something. And the interesting part is beyond 175, 200 million people, they actually are not comfortable in English. So finally, we will have that advantage too. But I think we've taken Atithi Devo Bhava too literally.
Mr. Prabhu, thank you very much. And I think the issue of how you locally address these problems will be taken forward by the next panel. But Deep Kalra, Sanjay Nair, Amitabh Kant, Mr. Rajneesh Kumar and Mr. Anil Agarwal, appreciate you joining us here at the Rising India Summit with your prescription for what will take India forward. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our panelists here this evening.